DLA Ignite. With me today, I've got Jennifer, and we're going to be talking about her book, Now What? A Survivor's Guide for Thriving Through Mergers and Acquisitions.
Say that 10 times fast.
Yeah, I couldn't. No. And if you're of a nervous disposition, probably it's a good time not to tune in. There's some adult content coming, isn't there?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, there is. Do you have that page earmarked?
That is that's the one with the bookmarking. Yeah. So Jennifer, what tell us, what was where was the door open where you decided to write this book? What was the door that opened?
I know. Who would write a book about mergers and acquisitions, right? That's what you're thinking.
I am, yes.
Well, by the third one. So I went through a major acquisition when Nokia acquired Navtech in 2008. That was my first one. And by my third one, which at that point I think was 6 years later, I thought, dear God, there's got to be a better way to do M&A.
You must have. You've still got the scars to show for it, have you?
Actually, finally, they've healed. I think
Okay.
through writing a book, I worked out a lot of my demons.
Right.
And thankfully, I had a good editor. The very first draft of that book was more of a vendetta book. I don't know if you're
I was going
Charles.
to say, was it
Charles
was it
Bronson,
about?
Liam Neeson. Yeah. I probably, which is why you still have the 10 personas in my book, the 10 people that you might experience in a merger and
Yeah.
acquisition. But thankfully, my editor reminded me that my book was not to be a vendetta book, but how to help people, which is truly what my mission was. So it was a cathartic experience to write the book. And then from there, frankly, CEOs that I had interviewed for the book, I interviewed about 60 C-suite executives, private equity, middle managers. And I kept asking me, well, what are you doing besides the book? And at first I thought my cheeky reply was, well, do you know how hard it is to write a book? Like I was just very proud of writing a book, but they were absolutely right. If I really wanted to help people better navigate a merger or an acquisition, whether being on acquired or acquiree, I had to do more than write a book, which is why I opened my consultancy in 2018. And now it's why I'm a speaker, global speaker, thankfully, because everyone experiences mergers and acquisitions around the world. So it's been an odd journey, one that I never expected.
Yeah. I mean, I really love the book. I've
And I understand you have refined tastes, Tim. So I'm enormously flattered.
I haven't actually been through a merger and acquisition, but I did work for a company that spent $30 billion on buying companies.
Okay.
So I kind of sat there and watched these people coming into the organization.
Yeah.
And I can see all those things. And I know the feedback that I would give, and I know it's the feedback that everybody gives, which is, why didn't I have this book 5 years or 10 years ago?
Yeah. Well, and it's why I joke. It's why I wrote the book, because when I was going through my first acquisition experience, I couldn't find a book that really helped you as a leader understand the emotions you go through. I couldn't understand why I was angry, why I would be depressed. And it wasn't, frankly, actually, it was one of the interviews that I did for the book. A CEO was describing the behaviors he was seeing amongst his workforce, and his mother was a grief counselor.
Right.
And she said, well, your employees are mourning the future that won't be, at least not as they expected. And when he shared that, it was like doves flew. I had an epiphany moment. It made me understand that's exactly what it is. We all envision a kick-ass future for ourselves, and then suddenly, with a merger or an acquisition, that can be called into question. But what I wanted the book to highlight, though, is that there is opportunity. You have to let go of the past. You gotta recognize your achievements from the past, but move on and contribute those to the future. If you don't, you'll just stay stuck. And that's really the mission of the book, is to help people understand their value and appreciate how to show it through the tumultuous times that can occur with a merger or an acquisition.
because in the section 2, the M&A stages of grief, you go through people go through denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. Well, sometimes it's not acceptance, but
Right.
And I've seen people go through all of those things when we acquired them.
And you probably noted when I write about acceptance, I say it's not as though people are running down the hallways clicking their feet together, right? They're not celebrating. They're finally at acceptance, meaning they accept that change has happened and there's no going back.
Yes, and that may be, I don't like your comp plan, I don't like your territory plan, I'm leaving, or
Yeah.
whatever that,
Yes. Acceptance purely is you accept that change has happened, that this is changing. And then it's for you to decide, is this something I want to be a part of or not? And what I try and do with the book is say, here's how to evaluate, whether you still have opportunity there. But that first section, that section 2, is really intended to just say, here's why you're feeling emotional. And that probably most profoundly has had the most response from people. Laugh at the personas, but that section, I've had so many people write, whether in reviews or write to me personally on LinkedIn, to say, oh, I read your book and I thought I was going crazy until I read your book. I couldn't understand why I was angry or depressed, because those aren't emotions you're used to feeling at work. We're used to setting objectives, strategies, and then executing. And now suddenly, as I equate in my book, it feels like a bad breakup, and you don't understand why.
Yeah, and as human beings, we're used to things that are, we get used to the way things are. You join a company and you can be thinking, this is, I'm enjoying myself. I was once given some advice that it's big company advice, which is that if you don't like the organization today, don't worry, because they're going to reorganize it in 6 months, and you may like it in 6 months' time.
Yeah,
and it was, and so it was one of those. It's one of those situations where you can be happy going along in your career, and all of a sudden this big change takes place, and it's not just the fact that you're probably getting your payslip from somewhere else, or there's like new expenses systems you have to, it's like you're going for a new job, but you didn't actually have to go through the process of the interview and the to actually get it, and all of a sudden for example, I work for an organization, a big American organization, where the classic thing, the expenses system was just awful. and these people would join from
really?
yeah. I know, it surprised you, doesn't it? And these people would join from these small companies, and they say, well, there's a better expenses system than this. You go, yeah, I know, but this is the one, this is it.
Right.
This is the one you've got to use. It doesn't matter how much you want to change it. And one of the leaders I work with, basically, she always said, don't rage against the machine, because she said, there's this pointless, you can't control this, so what you need to do is it's pointless putting anger and rage into this, because as you can't change it. You either accept it or you move on.
Which is I'd say the driver, my purpose in writing the book was exactly that. It's why it shifted from a vendetta book, right? Because that's not going to help anyone.
No.
It really was great and cathartic, and I could name every character that I have in that, section 3. But for that very reason, mergers and acquisitions aren't going to go away. In fact, I actually highlight in the beginning of the book, they're here to stay. Our propensity as human beings to want to acquire, it's why we buy the shoes we don't need. Right? It's why we buy that watch that we've already got 4. So we're naturally acquisitive, and I recognize that. So for me,
it's interesting you say that, because if you think about the way the business is organized, if you went back 100 years, businesses were set up to run for 100 years. Now the way the businesses are set up, they're actually they're set up to be sold, because most of them are funded either by venture capital or private equity, and that's about buying and selling.
Right, and that exploded certainly after the pandemic, right after 2020.
Yeah.
You had that already in motion pre-pandemic, and then with so many distressed businesses, it just exploded. So, but for that reason, my goal was to just guide you, right? I wanted to be, and thankfully, so many people have said this when they've read the book. I wanted to be like your friend, sitting on the bar stool next to you, and we're drinking a pint, and
Mm.
I'm giving you all the advice I possibly can in the few hours we're going to be at the bar,
Mm.
right? And so I
I
didn't
love
want
the way that you spoke in English to me there, pint.
well, because it's exactly what I had in mind. When you're writing a book, it helps to visualize the person who you're writing it for, and then where you are. And I just happened to be at a bar. I did beer advertising for a few years when I was in advertising, so it was a natural place to go to.
And I love the way that you put in your Spotify playlists.
Yeah, well, that I joked about it being like a bad breakup, but I was only half kidding. I thought, when in my life have I had these feelings, anger, depression? Thankfully, I haven't had terrible breakups, but there's always those bad breakup moments where you listen to music to get you through, right? And so I joked that my songs, little AC/DC, some Rolling Stones, Frank Sinatra, and Anita Baker. And I thought, well, why don't I
Well, you got
create
things like "Ray of Light" by Madonna, and um, I'm trying to find ones
Got
that
the Beatles in there. Got the
"Stuck
Beatles
in
in
the
there.
Middle with You," Steelers
Yeah.
Wheel.
That's the bargaining stage.
Should I stay or should I go? By the Clash, which is a classic. Yeah.
But so here's the perfect thing, and it's actually part of the keynote that I give, where I actually have the audience, where they create their own playlist, right? So I say, think right now, how'd you feel when you first heard about the changes? What was the emotion? And then pick a song that best describes that. And then now think about how you feel now. Oftentimes when I'm talking to organizations, they're in the neutral zone, right? They've just gone through, the deal's been announced, all of that. And now the opportunity is to think about, okay, how do I feel now? And then I said, pick a song for that. And then how do you want to feel moving forward? Pick a song for that. And it's amazing. The Spotify playlist is public. So people have added songs. I've got Miley Cyrus's Wrecking Ball. Journey's very popular, Can't Stop Believing. Um, and thankfully, what it does for the audience is it helps recognize that they're in a stage, right? These are stages. And sometimes just the benefit of learning you're in a stage and that you will move on, it's like a breakup, right? You get to the other side, you find out that there is another partner out there for you, but you just got to get through it. And fortunately, the playlist seems to have sparked a lot of music lovers out there to create their own playlist.
And then we move on to the section 3, which is the post M&A deal cast of characters.
Yes. Yeah.
Um,
Those are the ones that, and I say intentionally at the beginning, one, they're gender neutral, right? So they can be both male or female, even though you have to draw people. So I try and equally have men and women in there,
so,
right? The
so, so
former
there's the
rock
former rock star.
star. He's
But you can imagine it, Jennifer.
one of
You
my
can,
more popular ones.
I used to see these. We used to buy these companies, and there were these people that would, turn up, and they were the best salespeople in the world. And they
Right.
knew how to play the system in their previous company. And they basically they were bought, and in day one, they just hit a brick wall.
Yeah.
And they
And
weren't the rock star they were anymore.
it's tough, right? It is that person who had the Midas touch, who was and it doesn't have to just necessarily be sales. That's where I agree with you. I see that most predominantly. It could be your chief technology officer. It
Yeah.
cobe an up and comer, right? Somebody who's like, oh, he or she has got it. But when you go through a merger and acquisition, the metrics for success change. They naturally do. And if you don't pick up on that, that's an issue. And two, if you pick up on it but resist it and refuse it, you're going to be left behind. And so I think the former rock star is one of my more popular ones because everyone has seen one, or in fact, I've had people confess during my sessions, that was me.
Mm.
I'm okay now, but it was really hard at the beginning because you were super successful in the way you operated. And now suddenly you question, if that skill set's still going to work for you. So
So let me just read them out, just so people can know what we're talking about. So you've got 10 of them, which is the former rock star, the great unifier, the know-it-all, the know-nothing, the black widow, the missing in action, the specialist, the opportunist, the ostrich, and the dominatrix.
yes, quite a variety.
And so
I should quickly add though, Tim,
yeah,
during those interviews that I did with CEOs and C-suite executives, I just showed them pictures and they all had stories. I didn't even need to say the name of the character. I
right.
just showed them the pictures that are in my book. So I want to be quick to say this is not Jennifer's whimsical, dreams of revenge in mergers and acquisitions. These are characters that show up consistently. It's not exhaustive list. I know there's more. People have given me some examples, but these were the ones I experienced and wanted people to get smart on. Here's what can happen to people, why behaviors might change.
And you can see that, with the as they go through the stages of their feelings, they're in a new organization. What behaviors should I have? And we bought organizations. We were a 120,000 person organization, and we were buying companies of 1,000 people, and they'd never worked for a 100,000 person organization.
Right.
And so there was the missing in action. I remember it's just people just used to go home.
Yeah.
And you go, where's Dave?
Right.
I haven't seen him for ages.
Yeah, the example that I use in my book is you're all on a conference call. There's a huge conference call, and conference calls when people come on, hola, say Juan, and they're all from all over the world. And then suddenly you hear, yeah, Bob here. And you put it on mute and you go, Bob? Who's Bob? Like, I didn't even know Bob still worked here. Does anyone know what Bob does? And I've had many people say, oh, we didn't need a merger and acquisition. We've got missing in action just in general, right? No one knows what they do. But it can amplify the problems with a merger and acquisition. When you have missing in action, you have too many of those and you won't get the mission won't be achieved, right? You can't have people holding back, waiting to see how things play out.
And we also had people that would do loads of stuff behind. They'd walk into a political organization, therefore they thought we need to play politics.
Yeah, that was where that comes up the most. It's the one I highlight can be the downfall of the great unifier. That tends to be the leader who people have admired and really like. He or she has their own team, but people just look to them for advice. And so the great unifier can be an amazing catalyst for change if he or she is aware of what's going on, the direction of the company. People will follow him or her. The issue is when they aren't swift on the politics that are shifting and changing. And so that's why I talk with a great unifier. For leaders, make sure your great unifiers are well informed and able to continue to influence people in a positive way. Because if people see a great unifier kind of being out of touch, then he or she quickly uses their influence.
And also, I think people need to understand that it's not necessarily leadership. That can actually be people.
Correct.
Because people have authority and also people have influence. And you may have authority but no influence, but you may have influence but no authority.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I'm very glad you point that out because I do highlight, right? These aren't just leaders. They're people at different rungs.
They can be individual contributors who are in effect a hub of a network of things.
Exactly.
So as we've only got a couple of minutes left, let's talk about the dominatrix because we've got to.
You've just been waiting. We've just been slowing for time. That's the bully. And originally I was going to make it a guy, but I had a diversity, equity, and inclusion expert look at my book, both men and women, and they said, well, you have to skewer both genders equally. And I had a lot, my know nothing and know it all were men, and so went with the dominatrix. And frankly, everyone knows the bully because they tend to be, particularly after a merger and acquisition, you need people who drive the change. They take no prisoners. They aren't about making friends. It's about the business. Full stop. The issue there is they can achieve great short-term results. But what I highlight, and particularly when I've talked to boards, I'll say they're a very seductive persona. But the issue is you have people who either burn out, they don't deliver their best work, right? Because they're afraid, or they leave. So you can have short-term results, but you're sacrificing long-term the mission potentially. So I talk about incentivizing the dominatrix or the bully in a way that makes them recognize, yes, you want short-term results, but you also want collaboration. You want to be able to maintain the talent in order to achieve success long term.
Yeah, I've worked for a bully, and it's terribly unpopular for me to say this, but at the time he was the right person to the right
Mhm.
person at the right time, because
Yeah.
we had to go through massive change.
So you
Change.
probably you experience what I said at the
What you
beginning.
just said is exactly what I experienced, which is that we went through massive change. We had to move the company completely through 180 degrees
Right.
because of competitive pressure, and they did. And once we did that, in effect, the usefulness was gone. Luckily, the person did actually change. One of the people that worked for them gave them the book about the chimp brain. I can't remember what it's called. It's written by one of the Great Britain Olympic doctor
Okay.
psychologist. The Chimp Paradox is the book, and it changed this guy's life. Absolutely amazing. He
Interesting.
went home and read it and said, "That's me." And we went, "Yeah, it is you." Yeah. He says, "I need to change this," and he did. And he probably
That's
lasted another.
astonishing.
It's probably lasted another 12 months. But once we went through that stage, we needed consensus,
Mm.
and we needed a consensus leader rather than a one that will just say, "Follow me." It was more like, we need someone that says, "Right, we're all going to go in that direction."
That's interesting. More often, what I would say, and this is again when I've spoken to boards, they can be great galvanizers and they get the short-term results, but you've got to be clear on how long they are there because
Yeah.
rarely have I seen the bully or dominatrix change. And what you don't want to have happen is you create such a toxic culture that you lose key talent. And
Yes.
that's why I always say to executive leaders, they can be very useful and powerful, but you got to go in with eyes wide open. You need to be clear on what this leader is capable of in the short
Yes.
term before they create a culture that you don't necessarily want for the long term.
Yeah. Jennifer, thank you so much for coming on and talking about your book. Thank you for
Thank
coming.
you,
Thank you
and
for
I'm so
coming.
glad you enjoyed it. That's
I loved it, and actually, because you just for the audience, Jennifer came on. We had problems with the sound, so we've actually re-recorded this. Well, not we've just done it live, but
we just wanted to talk again.
yeah, and actually, we like each other's company, so we just. But just it's like 30 minutes to go, and I thought I better get the book out. So I thought, I haven't read this. Actually, and it's a bit like an old pair of shoes. When I put them on, it's like actually, I read a lot of
Remembered
books,
how much you loved it.
but it is a really good book. And if you're involved in M&A, mergers and acquisitions, if you're part of a merger and acquisition, I would say this is the book. And I've not read any other books about M&A, and if there are any books, please put it in the details in the chat.
They're usually
But
about the art of the deal, Tim. You don't
okay.
want to.
But I mean, this is for this, and it's not for salespeople, just for salespeople. It's for everybody. It's for understanding. If you're going through a merger and acquisition, if you're going through a merger or you're being acquired, and I think
Right.
it's a comfortable read. It's not a textbook or anything, and I think it
That's
explains a lot.
intentional, right? I wouldn't sound like a textbook if I was sitting next to you having a pint, so
No, having a pint in a pub, yes, eating fish and chips,
Absolutely, with
yes,
vinegar.
salt and vinegar.
I tend to go for the vinegar.
So Jennifer, where can people find you?
So, I hang out a lot on LinkedIn. That's my platform. You won't find me many other places, and then also my website, but where I put out my content, whether I've written for Fast Company or HBR, or I've got, a new take on mergers and acquisitions. I put that out on LinkedIn. And then my website is jenniferjfondrevay.com. So if you learn how to spell my name, you can find me on the internet.
Fondrevay.
Excellent. Thank you. It's French. So I appreciate you taking the
Oui.
time to spell it out.
Merci.
Merci.
Jennifer, thanks for coming on today.
Thank you for having me again, Tim.